You're listening to Shooting Hoops with your hosts, Dia Miller and Adam Drexler.
Welcome back to Shooting Hoops, a podcast about basketball and the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm your host, Dia Miller. I'm here with my co-host, Adam Drexler. It has been a couple weeks since we've done this. We had some sickness, we had some stuff going on, and it kind of set us back a couple weeks. But here we are. Episode 10, I believe, is where we are at. Adam, how are you feeling? What's going on? Update me on your life.
Feeling great. The holidays were a blur, as they always are every year, but it's amazing. You know, you get to see family and life goes on. And I got hit by the illness, the sick bug, and took me out for a bit, but I am back and stronger than ever because you can't keep a Drexler down.
I don't think you even believed that.
No, it definitely got me. I was so out of it.
Yeah, it's rough, and I think too, like, I swear as you get older, it gets worse because I watch my kids get sick and they bounce back so fast, and I get sick and it takes me like a month to get back to my normal life. To try to get back into the swing of things takes so long after you've been sick.
Yeah,
it's rough.
Yeah, it's been wild. How have you been?
I'm good. I got sick briefly there too. Got through the holidays. It's raining in California. I know everybody is like, whatever, it's rain, especially most people listening to this podcast are probably, Portland based or Oregon based, and they're going to laugh at me crying about the rain. But listen, California is not for rain, and it has been raining for almost a month consistently, and that doesn't happen here. So it's basically like Armageddon. Nobody knows how to drive. Everybody's taking longer to do things or canceling things. Stores are packed. Like if you go in any store, it's like people don't know what to do in the rain, so they go to the store. I don't know. It's been really weird. It's just really weird, and I feel dumb complaining about rain because I grew up in Oregon, but like it's different here when it rains, and I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, it's always a weird thing to talk about, like rain, like a little bit of water is just like stopping everything in the modern day society. But yeah, rain in California is definitely a rare sight.
Yeah, and no one knows what to do. No one knows how to handle it. It's fine. We're gonna be fine. We're gonna make it through this. So since we last recorded, and I actually forgot to mention this when we were talking before the podcast about what we were going to talk about. But since we recorded, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened. And one of the things that happened right after we last recorded was, Dame beat your dad's record. We talked about that. And then there was a ceremony. And I wanted to talk with you and give you a chance to address this on our podcast because there's been a lot of talk about it and we haven't done that since we haven't recorded, but there were a lot of things being said about your dad not showing up for the ceremony and not sending in a video. And there's a lot of speculation. Clyde doesn't have social media. You don't see him online in that capacity. So you're kind of the closest thing we get to that. And so tell us, Adam, give us an inside scoop here.
Okay, well, yeah, I was just checking Twitter casually, late at night, and I found like a whole thread of people just like bashing my father. And I was like, what'd he do? And I read the original tweet and it was like, how dare he, something along the lines of, he's not loyal to the city because he didn't do it, 10-second video for the game. And like, yeah, 10-second video is nice, but I mean, I personally happened to be there when my father placed a call to Chauncey Billups and Damian Lillard and congratulated him and said that he wanted the moment to be all about Damian Lillard and that he wasn't gonna, get in the way or interfere. He just wanted it to be all about him and all eyes on him, which in my opinion is kind of how you want it to be. It's it's his day. He broke the record, and my father said all he needed to say to Damian Lillard. And I think a lot of fans kind of were rubbed the wrong way because they felt like they deserved a message or a call from my father as well. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I wish that my father could call each and every Blazers fan individually and ask them how their day was, give them a high five, tuck them in at night, read them a bedtime story. But
Listen,
I mean,
that would be quite a sight.
but I mean, my father's he's a private guy. He doesn't do social media. He doesn't comment on the media. He doesn't do interviews. Very, very few things he does in the social media world.
Right.
So, he likes to just give people calls, and that's what he did there. He's a very quiet guy, and I kind of just had to go on and clarify because a lot of people just don't know. I mean, if you look at all the videos of my father, like he's never talking trash. He's not rah. He scores and goes back on defense with the same face as if he didn't score. I mean, he's a quiet guy. So just had to say my piece. And it's actually really cool. A lot of Blazers fans ended up, coming out in support of my father and backing him up and speaking on some of their stories and interactions with him, which was really cool because I didn't know, he was doing all that. So it was very awesome to hear everyone's stories.
Yeah, it was funny because you kind of made news. Like I started seeing your what you were saying popping up, and meanwhile I'm texting you because I was getting frustrated, and you were having a good time with it. And it's interesting because I think we live in this media age where everything is right at your fingertips and everybody is readily available. Like we have in this day and age, we have more reach to people that we normally wouldn't, like celebrities and athletes and things like that. You can pick up your phone and you can pull them up on social media and you can send them a DM. They may never see it. They may, but they may never see it. They may never respond to it. But like you have that kind of access. You have access into, what they're doing, their daily lives, if they choose to share that. There's so much access. And I think that in a lot of ways, we've lost the art of like direct communication. How many people will like post an Instagram story saying happy birthday to their friend instead of like texting them? It becomes this like, we're going to put it out there publicly. And I've done that for sure. And I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but I definitely think that that's not everybody's cup of tea. And from what I do know about your dad, that lines up that he would actually pick up a phone and call and have that conversation, which I'm sure meant a lot to Dame, I would think. And I think that, there's something really kind about saying like, we're going to leave this for Dame and let him have his moment. I'm sad that it turned into what it did. But I think you made a point too, that like, he doesn't work for the organization anymore. And he hasn't for 20 something years, which made me feel really old, by the way. And so I think, even though, obviously like fans want to see him. And I think the fact that he's not on social media and doesn't do a lot of interviews is part of why fans want to see him so bad. Because
I think, it's hard to like, you see a lot of names, like you see like Charles Barkley you have access to Charles Barkley. You have access to Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, Michael Jordan will go to the games. And having that kind of access, seeing their faces.
But wait, does Michael Jordan go to Chicago games or does he go to Hornets games?
He owns that. He goes to Hornet games, which is oddly enough, Chicago fans don't badmouth Michael Jordan.
You don't really see him at their games.
Yeah, he hasn't gone to a game or anything for the Chicago Bulls and since he played for them. I don't think, but I don't know about Chicago fans. All I know is a Blazer fan.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I kind of asked my dad about it. I was like, hey, like, what is the deal with the organization? And he just plainly told me, because I think a lot of people, there's a misconception that my father's just like got a direct line to everyone in the Blazers organization, and everyone's just on a string at the push of a button. But
Right.
my father was like, I haven't spoken to those guys and since I played. Uh, After he was done playing, they didn't reach out to him. He was looking for a coaching job. They didn't offer to give him one. They didn't, he wanted to be in management. The Blazers didn't contact him. They didn't say anything. And it's no hard feelings, but I mean, people are mad that my father is not involved in the organization, but the organization wasn't particularly involved in my father after he was done playing for them. So
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
that's just kind of how it is. So when people are like, oh, why is he not, sitting at all the games?
Right.
It's like, well, I mean, it's just a relationship that needs work.
Well, and I think too, I think I tried to really look at the conversation that was happening around this and see like why are people upset? Like, are they upset that they think he didn't acknowledge it? Like, what is, and I think a lot of it, honestly, is deep rooted in like those of us, like our generation who grew up watching your dad playing and like that was, he was their player. And I think a lot of people are really bitter that he went to Houston still. And I think a lot of people are really bitter that when he was inducted in the Hall of Fame, he didn't use a Blazers jersey. And it's interesting because I get that as a Blazer fan, but as somebody who's talked to you and knows, this is your dad's history is in Houston. That's where he grew up. That's where he started playing. That's where he finished his career. That's his home. It's always been his home, even though he played in Portland and I think really truly loved the organization and the city and the fans, that's home. And so it's interesting, to hear it from that perspective. But I think also like as a fan, like you're entitled to think what you want to think. But I think that these narratives get built around people's like bitterness over that versus like actual reality. People are bitter about these things. And so that turns into, well, Clyde hates Portland. And that's just not a fair jump. Like that's not
I mean, you and me, we had the podcast where my father was sitting here talking about all the great times he's had in Portland.
He said Portland was his favorite team. I'm just saying.
I mean, it sounds so contrived to think that, he would just hate the city. I mean, home is Houston for him. And I even asked him about the Hall of Fame thing. Like people are claiming that you went to the Hall of Fame as a Rocket. I mean, like you want him to like get a 10-day for the Blazers so that he can retire as a Blazer. I mean, you go to the Hall of Fame, it's an individual accolade. Being in the Hall of Fame, it's not like you can't put a team in the Hall of Fame. It's an individual. So him as a professional, all of the total accumulation of all of his years in the NBA is what makes him a Hall of Famer. So I think that's weird when people kind of claim that he went as a Rocket or represented the Rockets. I think he's mostly just representing himself because it's his Hall of Fame, induction. And the funniest part about the whole thing was like, I remember like you sent me a text like, "Are you okay, Adam?"
Like, yeah. I just choked from laughing. Yeah, because I'm watching this all take place and I'm thinking like I know how like protective I am of my family. And so if I was having to watch this play out, like people are reacting as fans and people who don't know him, but for you, that's your dad. And so my thought is like, are you good? Is this like, and you were just cracking up. Like
it was, to me, I honestly, I find Twitter hilarious. So I'm always down for people to share their opinions because I like having conversations with people. I like seeing what people's thoughts are. And like, even if I disagree, it's still kind of funny to see some of these like people like, how dare your dad? He burned the bridge on the city. He, like you think he was this mega villain that did something, but some of them were kind of funny. And then you talk to these people, you reply a little bit, there's a little bit of back and forth, and then they actually end up being like, ah, he wasn't that bad. He was
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah, I think
it's just
it's
people are
really
in the moment. So
for
I like
sure.
it.
For sure. That's definitely a lot of it. I think there's a lot of people reacting in the moment. And I think, you know, you, this happens to me. Like I'll be scrolling, I'll have an idea or a thought or a feeling. I'll start scrolling Twitter and reading everybody else's. And I'm like, oh, maybe I feel this way too. So I think, yeah, but it was really cool to see you kind of be able to step in and say things. I think that's been really, you know, really kind of interesting um, because your dad's never been on social media, there hasn't really been any kind of link to him. And now you're kind of able to do that in some ways. And I think that that gives some really good perspective where he's not having to do all the social media type stuff and can still remain private, but you can kind of, you know, help to have those conversations, I guess. It's been
Yeah,
kind of
I feel like it's not necessarily a secret. I mean, my
right.
father loves the city, and you know, he's always going to have his, you know, he has opinions about things, but
Right.
a lot of people don't
We
get to
all
hear them
do.
because he doesn't do it on
Right.
social media.
Right.
So I mean, anytime that I can chime in and share something or a tidbit or a bit of knowledge, then yeah, I'll try to chime
Yeah.
in and update people on the status of his opinion of Portland, I guess.
Apparently we need to keep on that. Okay, so moving on with the current Blazers and their state currently. The Blazers are, let's see if I remember how to do this. We're because so for those of you listening on podcasts, you don't see everything. If you're watching on YouTube, you know, we throw tweets up here and things, but it's a whole process on my end to like click the right buttons and end up with the right thing. So let's see if I can remember because we haven't recorded this in a little while. See if I can remember how to do this. Ah, I did it. Okay.
Nice.
So
That was smooth.
that was so smooth. So currently the Blazers are 10th in the West. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can see in front of you the standings. If you're listening, the Nuggets are currently in first. Nuggets, Grizzlies, Pelicans, Kings, which that's a whole story for a whole day. Mavericks, Clippers, Warriors, Jazz, and Timberwolves all in front of the Blazers. But the margins are small here. You know, we are currently 21 and 22, so just below 500. But if you look at the standings, they're really all the way up to like fourth place. There's only a couple games difference. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's actually not a bad place to be.
no,
This is kind of a weird year for the NBA because the West is now super competitive, where there's only like two teams that have zero chance. Um, so I think the Blazers, like they went through a string of games where they were kind of losing and they were winnable games. We just couldn't figure it out. But like, um, you know, we're, you know, 3 games away from being in that top echelon in
right,
the playoffs.
right.
So I think it's not a bad place to be. It's just like people forget. Once again, I always bring this up. At the beginning of the season, people thought we were going to be a lottery team. So we're 10th now, but check back in next week and see.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. We've lost some games that we should have won, but we've also had some injuries that were crucial. And I think too how quickly we forget that we were at the top of that list at the beginning of the season. That team still exists. They're capable of playing that way. We know it's there. And then in the last couple games that we just saw them kill the Mavericks, you know, that's and we were almost at full strength again. I think Justice Winslow was the only one that was injured. So we're getting back. We're getting back to that. But it's funny because you go from like a few days ago before they played the Mavericks, everybody's like, trade everybody, to, you know, 2 days later, oh, hey, look at us win. So how quickly we go up and down.
Yeah, it is a roller coaster season for sure. I think there are a lot of teams right now this year particularly, everyone's hyping up these trade rumors and hyping up these trade expectations, and people think like, oh, we're going to trade for somebody and get, we're going to get to the finals. And I think that's unrealistic.
The trade or the getting to the finals?
No, it's possible to, like, anything's possible in the sport, but I think if people think like, oh, if we trade, tear down the team or there are very few moves that are obvious that can put us over the top to where it's like, oh, we're instantly the best team. It's kind of a wait and see kind of thing.
It's funny you say that because I literally in therapy talked about the Trailblazers. I'm not even kidding. And I was
you like that?
No, I mean, not quite that bad, but I was explaining how I was using them as an example to explain like how I see things. And I was saying that, like, there's a difference between possible and probable. And I struggle with that difference. I really struggle. So like, if it's possible at all, I'm over here like, yeah, it's totally going to happen. Like if it's totally going to happen. So that's been I'm still over here like, yeah, we can totally go for a championship. But possible and probable, two different things.
It is possible.
But it is absolutely possible. And I would just like to throw this here up there. Whoops. There we go. So this is Damian Lillard in the last 5 games. In the last 5 games, Damian Lillard had 40 points, 3 rebounds and 6 assists, then 36 points, 5 rebounds and 10 assists, then 50 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, then 30 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, then 34 points, 4 rebounds, and 8 assists. That's a heck of a 5-game streak for Damian Lillard. Yeah. Anybody who is not talking about him as an all-star or, whatever is just at this point, like, how do you not look at that? Yeah. That's insane. I mean,
people forget that he's a top 3 point guard in this league. And, top 3, top 4, top 5, whatever. To me, I mean, I think people don't realize how rare Damian Lillard is. He'll probably be the last Blazer for a very, very, very long time to break a scoring record.
Yeah.
Because in today's NBA, people jump from team to team.
Yep.
So Damian Lillard has been with the team for so long that he has broken a record, and
he's continuing to break records.
And he's continuing to be excellent. He's still in his prime. So, I mean, it's just something you love to see, and you just hope that there's a way to shake up the roster a little bit or shake things up to the point where maybe he can get deeper into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to watch him, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad that he was able to come back from that injury and be Damian Lillard. There was a lot of speculation going into this season. Would he be able to hold up, and play to the degree that he had before? And he's proving that he can, and he will. And I think that's really exciting. He's so good. He's just so good. And he's just so good.
Yeah, I think there was a moment there when they made the rule change to stop the 3 foul calls where you jump into the air and people just fall and they would call a foul. Once they changed that, a lot of people thought that Damian Lillard's effectiveness would go down, but he's really showing that he's adapted to the rule change and has found a way to thrive still. And mind you, he's got other people on the team that are 20-point-a-game scorers. So just think about how effective your offense has to be to the point where you can average. You're the leading scorer, and your other teammates can also average 20.
Yeah. So well, and we also have to mention his defense. Like, I feel like he has elevated his defensive play since last season.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Immensely. So I think, we're seeing the guys that we've had on the team improve in the areas we need. It's interesting to watch because the graph that comes out, I think, every week that shows like the effectiveness. Our defense has been significantly better than our offense, and it's been a while since that's been true of the Blazers. So
Yeah.
when they're sinking shots, this is a really dangerous team between those two things, for sure. The other big thing that has been going on here is Gary Trent. So not Gary Trent. Goodness. Gary Payton.
GP2.
Gary Payton the second. So a couple tweets about Gary. This comes from Sean Hyken, and he's reading. Oops, whew, forgot how to talk there for a second. He's quoting Damian Lillard talking about Gary Payton II. And so Damian Lillard on Gary Payton II, he says, he plays with a lot of joy. It makes sense coming from Golden State. They're like the ultimate example of a team that plays with joy. And he has that about him. He brings that sort of joyous spirit to the team. You can feel that presence. So Gary Payton II is back. We missed him. He was gone for the majority of the season, and then he came back and played a game, and then he got hurt and sat out a couple more games, and now he's back again. And his presence is definitely felt. I think Gary's one of those players that Dame's absolutely right. He loves the game. He loves to be playing, and you can see it in how he plays. But he is a difference maker. You feel the difference that he makes when he is on the court.
Yeah, he plays with high
sure.
IQ, and he hustles. He makes the intangible plays that often win you games. So that's really effective. And he's a player that, he doesn't need the whole game to leave his mark. He can do it in a matter of minutes. He can come in off the bench and still impact the game severely. In the span of a few minutes, he can really turn the tide of a game. So there's a reason why Golden State kept him, and Golden State is in the practice and business of winning championships. So if you're somebody who comes from that kind of culture, it can only improve your team.
For sure. And then we've got this one here too. This comes from Kevin KY_PDX. He says, GP2 only played 15 minutes today, but those were some of the most impactful 15 minutes I've watched by a bench player in a while. Yeah, really true. Really true. He's one of those players that you just feel the difference that he makes. And I love players like this where you can look at their stat line. And now, granted, Gary has good stats. I'm not diminishing that. But so much of what he does doesn't show up on a stat line. And I love players like that. I just think he makes a difference. You feel the difference when he's on that court.
He's one of those players that me as a player, I want him on my team because he's effective, and he's effective without needing the ball in his hands. He's just a part of the team. He's a very good high IQ team player. And that's what you need around Damian Lillard, who's going to be the primary offensive player.
Yeah, Gary's not somebody that you're going to find standing around in a corner waiting for something to happen. I think about that. And that's not to say that, there are definitely players like that where if they're not directly involved with what's going on, you kind of wonder what the heck they're doing. And Gary is just not that player. Gary is a player who is he's going to find a way to make a difference regardless of what else is going on that court. And I think that's contagious. And I think that we're seeing the impact that's making and I think that's part of what people are talking about when you feel the difference he makes on the floor. I don't think it's just him. I think he elevates his teammates and increases, what's happening when he's out there.
Yeah, he's a special player, and the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. His father's a very special player too, so you love to see it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, another guy we got to talk about, Jusuf Nurkic. Now, this is always a fun one. First of all, I will forever be a fan of Jusuf Nurkic, no matter how he plays or where he goes. I just like him. And that may be a controversial opinion right now. There's been a lot of talk on Twitter Sometimes I feel bad for the people who aren't on Twitter when we do these podcasts because I feel like it's such a big part, but it kind of is a big part of like the sports conversations. But there's been a lot of talk about Nurk, and fans are brutal.
Yeah. Sports fans are the most brutal fans of all time. There is no like satisfactory. It's just like you're either great or terrible.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult place to be in when you're somebody on a team like the Blazers, where on any other team you'd be a star player almost. I mean, pretty much not, I wouldn't say a star player, but on other teams he would be like, other teams would be dying to have a player like him. And I think a lot of people are saying, oh, well, we should trade him for another center. I'm like, name like
Right.
a center that we can get that's better than Nurk right now.
Right.
Because
Well, and
you'd
that
be
we
hard
can get.
pressed.
That's
Yeah.
huge because I think some forget that it's not as simple as like we want that guy. Like match there has to be like and they have to be available, and the team has to want the trade in return. So it's not like you can just go find, you can't just say I want Joel Embiid and that's that. Like it's complicated. But you're absolutely right. Like Nurk has a lot of talent, and he's somebody, I do think that this year he's taken accountability. He said a few games ago, he made a comment about how he had 5 turnovers, I think, and he said, I can't do that. I'm letting my team down. I can't play like that. And he really took that on. I don't feel like I remember hearing things like that from Nurk in the past. I feel like that was big for him to recognize that and identify that and call himself out. And then we've seen him play really well. And I think, there was an interesting stat in the last game, I believe, the second game against the Mavericks. I think it was Kevin that said that Nurk, in his entire career, Nurk had, up till this point, I think Nurk had taken had made 33 threes or something like that, 32. And in this season alone, he's made 33. So this season alone, he's made more 3-pointers than the entirety of his career before that. So you're seeing a player who is learning, who's improving his skill, who's adjusting to the game. And I think that that's valuable. I think that that's something that, Nurk is doing really well right now.
Yeah, and he's shooting the 3 at an incredibly high percentage. He's at like 40-something% right now. That's incredible. So
yeah,
I mean, people want him to like average 20 points or something. I think when you break down, there are just so many offensive players on the Trailblazers that it's hard to expect somebody to be the, to stand out in that regard. There's only so many people that can stand out. I think one thing that he does stand out on is the defensive end. He's rebounding, and I mean, he's not he's not Hakeem Olajuwon blocking shots, but having a presence like him down there, it really helps the defense. And to go along with that, you have defensive-minded players like Josh Hart, Jeremy Grant, and GP2. So it really just helps that he's down there. And then on top of that, he can contribute on the offensive end. And he's really, the last few games, he's kind of been taking more shots, which I kind of like to see.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm a big fan of playing inside out. And if you get him going early on and you kind of get him more touches, it's going to open up the perimeter for your shooters. And you have phenomenal shooters like Jeremy Grant, Damian Lillard, and Simons who can really shoot the ball, and getting them easy looks by having somebody inside is really helpful for the team.
Yeah. Yeah. So I put this up here, the quote that I was talking about. This comes from Sean Highkin again. He's quoting Yusuf Nurkic, and Nurk said, "These turnovers, man, I've got to own it. I'm hurting my team. It's not me. It starts with me." I can't have 5 turnovers per game. I'm hurting my teammates way too much. And then that same game, which was a rough one, Damian Lillard, I don't know what the question that was asked to him was. I'm guessing it was something about at what point does the team break or something. But this was his response. Again, this is coming from Sean Highkin. He's quoting Dame. Dame says, I'm on the team, so breaking isn't going to happen. I'll tell you that right now. That's not an option for us. I love this from Dame. I love this confidence. I love this just kind of taking ownership of where they're at. And they did. They turned it around. You know, they had those games that were rough that they should have won and they didn't. And then they came out and beat the Mavericks twice in a row.
Yeah. I always find those questions to be funny. Like whenever reporters after the game will be like, so do you think that the team is terrible and on a path of destruction? And like what is the player supposed to say? Like you work for the team, like you go to work there every day, and they're like, yeah, so your team is like a sinking ship. Would you describe it as a tragedy? Be like, probably not, because you work there.
Right. And not to you. Well, it's interesting because every now and then you'll see a player. I don't know that we've seen it with the Blazers, but you've seen it with other teams where a player will say something and everybody's like, oh,
yeah.
Like, especially if they call out another player on their team. Like,
yeah. Those are like, that's if like there's something totally wrong with the organization. Like you'll get moments like that. I think I saw on Twitter the other week, it was Eric Gordon for the Houston Rockets was asked a question by the media. He said, okay, so over the past few days, you demanded that there needs to be improvement in our organization, our team, and how we play. So one of the reporters was like, well, is there any improvement? And he's like, no.
It is interesting, though. It's an interesting, like, I haven't really thought about this, but again, you as a player, you have a little bit of insight on this, but like there's a sense in which we want like realness. We want the nitty gritty. We want those responses from players, but you're right. They're essentially working for an organization and they're professionals. They're going to come out and they're going to give you a professional answer. I don't think that always means that nothing's going on behind the scenes, but I definitely think that this is a team that does media really well. I think Dame has always done media really well, where he gives honest answers, but you never see him like throwing people under the bus. If anything,
he is conscious of the fans and cares about representing the organization, which is means you're a professional. I think a lot of the times you'll find people that have those outbursts or say those things are just kind of either being unprofessional or just don't want to be with that team and they want to be traded away. So they feel like they can just say whatever. But I mean, Damian Lillard's been here for a while. Going back to my father versus the city of Portland. A lot of people were they were saying like, oh, well, Damian Lillard, he high fives people at the arena and, he signs things for fans. We never see Clyde Drexler at the games and high-fiving people. I'm like, well, it probably has something to do with the fact that Damian Lillard works for the Trailblazers currently. And that's not to discredit the fact that he is also very kind and, will take patience to sign things and accommodate fans and answer questions. But it's also like, it's very few players are going to sit up at the interview and be like, yeah, this is terrible. We all suck and we should just quit.
Right. Right. Well, because then it also makes you a problem. Like if for any organizations in the future, you don't want your players out there saying stuff. But I do think though, I do think that there were honest answers given. And I think that, I think they do this pretty well, but that is interesting, which leads me actually to something else. I want to talk about because
talk about who you kind of cut out there.
Chauncey.
Oh,
Billups,
Chauncey, yeah,
the coach. Remember him? So
Mr. Big Shot.
I want to talk about this because he's been interesting in the media. availability and his responses to things. And there's been a lot of talk on Twitter. Again, we're bringing up Twitter. There's been a lot of talk about how much of these losses that we had, especially the ones where we really should have won, how much of that falls on him. And I will say, I'm looking at how we started the season, and I'm like, man, on paper, this is a really good roster. Like, I don't even know what moves I would make to improve it. Like, realistically, I don't know what to do to improve it. So maybe that's fall on the coach. Like, the starter, I can't remember which game it was now, but starters in for a significant amount of time, and they were clearly winded and drained, and the bit wasn't getting as much time, and that's the coach's call. So how much of this, Adam, because you have, like, I'm from the perspective of somebody who's watching the game on TV, who's, following the stories and things like that, but I don't know the ins and outs of this the way that you do. You know the coach-player relationship, you know how this works. So tell me how much of this falls on the coach at this point.
It's hard to say, because as a coach, you can only do so much. The players have to play the game. Coaches kind of gives you a kind of strategy or like a system, and you kind of operate and you win or lose games based on the success of that system. So I think from the sample size we have, it's found success, but it's also been kind of up and down in terms of some games that could be won, or it comes down to little things, little errors. A missed shot or two is the difference between us winning or losing a game. If we were getting blown out by every team, then yeah, I would say, okay, that's a coaching thing. You shouldn't. If your team is getting blown out, then yeah, it's your coach's job to change that system if you're not competitive. But if your team is able to stay competitive and border on winning games more often than not, then it's kind of hard to blame the coach. At that point, it just comes down to execution and if players are making shots or not. But I also think that it does fall on the players as individuals. Like, it's their job to perform, and it's their job to go out there and execute and make things happen. And it's the coach's job to put them in a position to help them make those things happen. So
yeah,
I would say if there are players that should be doing a lot more that are not, then yeah, I would say, okay, that's coaching. Like, if I know that Damian Lillard can average 30 points per game, and the coach's scheme for the night is that Damian Lillard is only going to get 8 shots, then I'd say that's bad coaching.
Using your players in the way that they need to be used, essentially.
Yeah, but right now, I think the only thing in terms of coaching I'd say is maybe on every night, it's been kind of inconsistent to see which of the other, aside from Damian Lillard, who's going to get his shots regardless, other players have kind of fluctuated between, like, okay, one night they only shoot 8 shots, the next night they shoot 12, 15,
right?
And it's like deviates. One night it's Nurk, then it's Grant, then it's Simons. And I take what the offense gives you, but sometimes you should have a general plan of, like, okay, we're gonna, to start the game, we're gonna go to this player, and this is oddly enough something that the Lakers do pretty well, is they pick who they're going to go to for a lot of their plays. Like, they'll be like, this is a play designed for LeBron to score the ball.
Right.
And LeBron will get the ball and he'll score. And then in the NBA, what you do traditionally is, if a play works, you run the exact same thing again.
Yeah.
So they'll run LeBron, and you'll see LeBron get, 10 points very quickly.
Right.
The Blazers do that with Damian Lillard. They don't particularly do it with other players consistently. And on any given night, it changes to who they're going to do that with.
Interesting.
So, I mean, that's kind of a coaching thing, but I can't say that he's doing a bad job. I think he's doing a great job, considering that he was supposed to be a lottery team.
So talk to me about this though, because this was my one thing that this is bad. This is a bad call on the coach's part. When you have starters playing 40 something minutes or close to, well, maybe not quite that, but like 50 minutes, you know, consistently and struggling because again, I am not a coach. It makes sense that if they're needing a break, whatever, it break the cycle, mix it up, put somebody else in, pull those guys out. But there were, I can't even remember which game it was. One game in particular where I was so frustrated because the starters got played the majority of the game, like a large majority of the game. And everybody's like, well, our bench is so ineffective. Well, the bench isn't playing. So they're not going to have points if they're not playing. And I'm watching this happen. I'm thinking, why are we doing this? Why aren't we mixing this up a little bit more? Because you and I have talked a lot about how versatile this roster is and how you don't have to have these 5 guys or these 4 guys. Like you can mix it up from different things like that. So like the same thing, why aren't we changing it?
Yeah. I don't really, that kind of comes down to personal preference. Some coaches will like go to what they know.
Yeah.
So like it's like if I'm the Lakers and I'm Darvin Ham and I know that my best player is LeBron James right now, and we need to keep a lead. I'm keeping LeBron James on the court because I don't want to lose the game. But the problem with that is that when you do that, you're relying on one player, and if that player goes out, you're in trouble. So that's why I think the Blazers are really hurting missing Justice Winslow because he was kind of the glue guy.
Right.
Damian Lillard was able to take a rest because Justice would actually come in and handle playmaking.
Yeah.
And because Justice has kind of been out, Nurk has been handling more playmaking, and it kind of it's changes like that where like you kind of lose a flow. And I know it's especially difficult for like rookies like Shaedon. I know like for him, if he was given probably starter minutes, he'd probably average around 18 points a game, 15 points a game. And it's one of those things where there's just not enough minutes, and you're on a team where the coach is still trying to figure out where to best use his guys. He just got GP2 in the lineup now. So now he's got to figure out, okay, well, now I have another guy that, is very consistent, needs to play. And I've got to find a way to work him into the system. So imagine when you have your whole roster healthy, how you allocate minutes.
Yeah.
And what that does to the team. So it's kind of difficult as a coach to have that, but it's actually a good problem to have, having more players who can help you than having players. Like I'd rather have that problem than not have enough players that can help me.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so Nasir Little's back. We lost him for a while. I feel like this was a fairly quick recovery for him to be back already. It seems like from a broken, because it was a hip, his broken, right? Wasn't it why can't I think of the word? Not a break. I mean, it was a break, but it was anyway, it was a bad injury. And it feels like he came back pretty quickly. So I'm glad to have him back. He looks good. He looks healthy. Again, we feel the difference of having him back, in my opinion. What do you think? How do you think he looks?
Yeah, like I think having him back in the lineup kind of helps just give more energy. And he's someone who kind of, I say this and I'm not trying to be like, this is not a dig or anything. It's like the players who are not going to take shots away. And he is kind of one of those players who kind of fits in and helps the offense run. Because like if everyone on the court is able to score a whole bunch of points, it actually kind of takes away, because then you end up having to fight.
Can assist.
for possessions. But if
Yeah.
you have guys who are just like, okay, my job in this play is to make sure that I screen my guy and I make
Right.
sure that I
Right.
go for an offensive rebound, or that I space out into the corner so that I can knock down the open three. Those kind of players really can change the look of an offense. So I think having him back is just another body that you can throw at offenses and defenses and see what happens. And it can kind of help people open up their game.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, again, one of those players that you feel the difference when it doesn't show up on a stat line.
Yeah.
So,
They're called role players. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah.
Happens. And like, that doesn't even mean that you're a bad player.
No.
The role players are they're very essential, and it's the NBA. If you give anybody in the NBA, 20 shots a night, they're gonna look great, because
Right.
that's just how the game is. I mean,
Right.
the game is a matter of who gets
Almost
the shots.
anybody.
Oh, almost anybody.
Almost anybody. Yeah. I mean, role players are crucial. I remember hearing Jabari Walker talk about that early on, that he was perfectly happy in that role, that, he wanted to make a difference and play in that role. And, we've seen him do that. And I think that's one of the reasons that this team works, is I think there are a lot of guys that don't feel the need to always have the ball in their hands or always be the guy scoring. I think this is a team that's really putting in a team effort and really, working together to play good basketball. That's valuable.
I hope he doesn't rush back, because I think it was his hip.
Yes.
And
it was like a fracture, a hip fracture. That's the word.
Yeah. I know, like, rushing back to that can actually, like, it's a pretty serious area to injure, so you don't want to rush back too quickly. But I mean, if he's ready, then I'm happy for it.
He looked good. He looked really good. Okay, so last thing to talk about before we wrap up is we are at that time of year facing the idea that we might not keep this same roster. We might have to say goodbye to someone. The rumors start flying of who we could get, and people so very quickly forget how much they love the players that we have. And you start to see, the trade machine come through, and the screenshots that look like a CVS receipt. Shout out to Josh for that. But there's these, Adam, I hate it. I don't like the uncertainty. I don't like the idea that we lose guys. I just sit in bed waiting for those tweets from Woj and Shams to come in and hoping that they don't say anybody that is on the Trailblazers.
Yeah, it's, as a spectator watching, it's always weird, because it's like, on one hand, your team might get, a great piece that can help you move towards something, but on the other hand, it's also scary, because
at what cost?
You're like, I don't want to get worse. So that's the thing about trades, is you never know. You never really know. There's some trades, like, if you trade and get LeBron James, then like, you're in good hands. But if what if we trade and make trades and get rid of pieces, and then we become a worse team.
Apart.
So that's always scary, and especially as a player, trades are the worst thing a lot of the time, because you're uprooting your life. You're going from a situation where sometimes you might be in a good position, and you're going to a brand new organization that may or may not work out for you. So it's kind of a scary thing for a player. It also kind of shakes up the team chemistry, because I mean, when players get traded in, now they have to fit within the system that has the culture that's already been established, which is pretty weird to do. With the Blazers, I saw on Twitter that there were a few people complaining about Josh Hart not taking as many threes or passing up open shots. And he was in, like, kind of the trade talks, and I'm like, I'm of the mind that, like, well, what can you get that's going to vastly improve the roster,
right?
by trading Josh Hart away, because I think there are very few people out there that you can trade Josh
Yeah.
Hart for that are going to help you more than Josh Hart can
Right,
help you right
right.
now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think because of his contract, that's a big
Mm.
part of the reason that he's in those conversations, maybe
Mm.
even more so than the fact that like they just think he's the player to trade. I think a lot of it is the contract. Hey, you want to trade this person and you want to trade for, like, you always hear people say, okay, we need to trade this person and we need to get someone who's going to improve the team. It's like, okay, but you're not giving a name. Like, show somebody that is going to do that. And Josh Hart is an interesting choice for people to pick because he's somebody that from the beginning of the season, you and I talked a lot about how versatile he was, how well he fit, how so many teams, how he could literally go to any team and fit in. And I see that all over Twitter too, where fans of other teams are like, we want a Josh Hart, like we want to find Josh Hart. And I think even the organization, I don't know who it was, but I think it might have been Joe, the GM, who said at the beginning of the season something along the lines of, we want more Josh Harts. Like we want more players like this that are versatile and whatever. So I would be surprised if they move him. I would think that they'll probably extend him, but I mean, it kind of remains to be seen. I think it's interesting what you say about like from the player's perspective. A couple years ago, when I first started working with Josh Childress, who, if you're not familiar with Josh, he played for the Hawks and the Nets and the Suns, and then he went overseas
And the Big Three.
And the Big Three. Yep.
And actually, he played in Japan when I was in Japan.
Okay. Yeah. So I knew that you guys knew each other because when I was going to shoot the Big Three, and I found out your dad was going to be there, I frantically texted Josh, and he was like, "Just tell him like that you work with me," because he knew your dad. And anyway, but when I first started working with Josh, we were traveling, and it was during a trade season, and I'm watching things happen. And I said to him, and I like working with players because I always kind of get their perspective. And I asked him, I said, did you ever get traded in the middle of the season like this? And he said, no. He said, but I watched it happen. And he said, there was one time where we were on a plane and the player got the message while we were on the plane on the way to a game. And we all got off the plane, said our goodbyes, and he got on the plane and he stayed on the plane and flew to his new team. Like that's how fast it would happen. And it's like, it's such a wild thing because sometimes, and he said like, sometimes they don't know. It's like, it's totally out of the blue. They have no idea it's coming. And, we sit here and talk as fans about like, well, we want this guy. Well, we want this guy. And I think it's such an interesting perspective for players, like what that's like for them. I can't even imagine. That's gotta be a wild ride. It's just gotta be a wild ride. But yeah, I think he'll stay. I don't think he's going anywhere. And realistically, you're right. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, I don't even know that I would make any moves at the deadline. If I'm being honest.
If I had to make, I don't know what you would want to get that can push us over the edge. But to me, if I'm the Blazers and I need to make moves, I think there was another article I saw that was about trading Shaedon Sharpe, which to me I'm like, why would you even do that? I mean,
no.
I think Shaedon is a future all-star. I think he's someone he has the body, he has the build that can be a two-way player, and two-way players are the biggest commodity in the NBA. And if I'm the Blazers and if I absolutely had to make a move, I would probably do what the Blazers have done in the past and is trade that, whoever's in the shooting guard position, and that would be Simons, because him and Damian, and I don't want him to be traded. But if you're talking about making a major change to the roster, the biggest change would be adding someone who is taller at the shooting guard position, because Damian Lillard takes a lot of shots. Simons also takes a lot of shots, and him and Dame kind of play a similar style of basketball where it's like, they're ball dominant. We saw that with CJ and Damian Lillard. They play a similar brand of basketball. And
Yeah.
if you really want to shake things up, you can try to trade that, but I don't think you'll find much better than you currently have.
No.
And you're giving away a young player who's playing phenomenally right now.
Yeah.
So
That
I
doesn't
don't know.
make sense. It really doesn't, because you're right. What are you going to get? It's not going to make
Mm.
sense. And Ant seamlessly, he fits. Listen, you are never going to find me saying trade Anthony Simons. I'm just putting that out there right now. It will never happen. I will never say it. It's like the same thing as Dame. I won't say it. I think he fits so seamlessly with this team. And I think that just even the relationship he's had with Dame and the way that Dame has essentially come and helped him build his game to where it is right now. When Dame is done, because Dame's not going to play forever, and Anthony is significantly younger. And so when Dame is done, Ant is going to just so seamlessly slide into that role that Dame plays, that he's valuable now as well. But knowing that that's kind of where the future is going, it doesn't make sense to me to move him, especially right now when you look at the options. Who are you going to move him for that's going to improve?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it in
not.
terms of like, okay,
I know.
Josh Hart, you can't really get like a big time player for trading Josh Hart away. You'd probably have to trade away one of your big players, and Simons would be one of those big players who, you would have to get something. If you give up Simons, who's a 20-point per game scorer, you'd have to get in return a close to 20-point per game scorer.
But we just don't. We just stay as is, and we just play and we win a championship.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting, but I think something I would like to see in the future for the Blazers, like down the road, is I know Simons is gonna have a huge contract. When it's time, they're going to have to pay him a lot of money. Shaedon, I think at some point in the Blazers' future, he's going to need starter minutes so that we can really see what he's going to be. Because right now he's in an inconsistent role. He'll have one game where he'll have 18, and then the next game he's gets 10 minutes so it's pretty difficult to kind of see what exactly he's going to develop into, because he's still developing. So it's just interesting, but I really do like the Blazers roster. I like every player on the roster. So that's rare. Normally you have players who are like, oh, we could do without this player. We can do without that player. I actually do like everyone on the roster, and you hope that's the hand you have, and you hope you can win with it. So we'll see what moves they make, but hopefully none.
Hopefully none. I mean, hopefully I always kind of
other teams make moves and they get worse.
Yeah, let's go with that. That's a good plan. Forget us making trades to get better. Let's just hope all the other teams make trades and get worse. I like this system. This is a great system. Oh, man. Well, anything else you want to add? We've talked, granted, we haven't done a podcast in a couple weeks, but this was a long one. Anything else you want to add before we close it up?
That is all for me.
All right. Well, it's been a good talk, Adam.
It's been great.
We've got more coming up. We're be back.
Shook off the rust and
we handled it. We should be back to normal, hopefully back to weekly podcast here. So thank you all for listening. Make sure that you have subscribed, whether it's on podcasts, on YouTube, wherever you're listening or watching. Make sure you subscribe, like, share. All of that stuff really helps us out. We just really appreciate you all listening. So go Blazers.
You're listening to Shooting Hoops with your hosts, Dia Miller and Adam Drexler.